So they went up there to a meeting, and then in the meantime, a guy by the name of Jim Rain, who lived on Crescent Drive in Willow Glen, his wife was a superintendent of a unified school district in San Jose, and she wrote and got a book. She didn't want to put because he was a used car salesman. So she made the living. That's all he did was drink, and all that kind of stuff. So she wrote and got a book. They told him they'd go to a meeting in Oakland. So they went up to a meeting in Oakland, and lo and behold, Mickey Carter and his wife were there. So all four of them got acquainted, and they lived 3 blocks apart from Crescent Drive in Willow Glen. So that's the divine thing about it. So they came down and started the first meeting in Jim's house on Crescent Drive. So then the official meeting, then they started it, and then the official first meeting was in August of at the YMC building downtown on 3rd Street. And they moved that down there, and that's when it started. So,
so where were you going to meetings when you first came in, and who was your sponsor?
Start there. The light's changing. I just need to do this nonsense real quick. And so you'll take it from the top of the question again. Okay. Ask the question again.
Tell me when you're ready. So where did you go to your first meeting, and who was your sponsor?
There's a guy by the name of Frank Keck, K-O-E-K. He had a ignition shop downtown on 2nd and San Carlos. And he had been in AA for 2 years. And he was, when I called AA, they came out. 3 of them came out. There was Frank Keck and Jay Jensen and I can't think of his name. Anyway, Kroll, Roy Kroll. His family owned the Kroll Publishing Company. So they came out and talked to me. So Frank Keck, Roy Kroll was really supposed to be the sponsor, but Frank Keck's the guy that gave me all the monitoring, because he had the shop at the time. So the next day I went down to Frank Keck's shop, and I hung around out there. Didn't even go to work. Matter of fact, I didn't go to work for 2-3 weeks. All I did was go to meetings. There was 13 meetings in the county. And so all I did was go to those meetings and come home and eat and go to meetings. The yard was going to hell. The backyard went to hell. The whole thing went to hell, and I wasn't even making any money.
So tell me about when you and Bernice and another couple had all the 12-step calls going to your house.
Well, what happened was they didn't have a central office yet, and they were about to get one downtown, but they had the phone bill, and there being only 13 meetings a week, why, they weren't collecting a whole lot of money, but they didn't have a lot of expenses except they had a damn phone bill, and somebody wasn't paying the phone bill. I think the phone bill ran up, I don't know what it was. So they weren't paying it, there was no money to pay it, so Lou Cullum, a guy by the name of Lou Cullum, who I got sober with, he and his wife, and I and Bernice, volunteered our phone numbers in the paper, so that would be the phone number they would call for Alcoholics Anonymous until they get a phone to get the phone number straightened out. So, and then in the meantime, while we did that, why, my wife kept a record of all the calls she got every day. And sometimes there'd be quite a few, and sometimes not so many, but she had quite a lot of calls, and they made a record of them, and she taped it, and they got a record of that down central office. So they finally got on their feet, got a central office downtown on First Street, and the old one of those buildings down there.
Tell me about the guy that rode the bicycle down to Gilroy or someplace. Who was that guy that was riding the bicycle?
Well, he's one of my mentors. A guy by the name of Bill Grace, who got sober before I did. He was sober when I come in, and he started a weekly newspaper on the east side of town. There used to be a theater out there on 24th and Santa Clara Street. Is that still there?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Anyway, he had an office across the street. He started a newspaper weekly, and he was a journalist, and he was fired from the Mercury News 2 or 3 times. He'd show up loaded on Monday morning, or he wouldn't show up, and his wife would call in and said, well, he's drunk again, and they put up with it the last time. They said, you tell him he's fired, don't ever come back again. So he went down, took the bus down to Gilroy and applied for a job in the weekly newspaper down there. Now, this guy had been a journalist all over. You know, he was a barnstormer all over the country, dragging his wife around like that. He couldn't stay sober. So he's going to get an interview with a job in that weekly newspaper, get on his feet and come back and show him how to do it. Well, he was staying in a hotel down there and staying overnight, and he happened to pass the bar, and you know what happened. Went in the bar, and he used some of his last money. He got loaded. He woke up drunk in the hotel room next morning, and he called his wife up and collected. He said, call those AA sons of bitches, I'm ready to quit. And she called those AA sons of bitches, and the guys from Gilroy had a meeting down there, and they didn't have a meeting there, but they got hold of an alcoholic down there, and he come over and took him into town, and he stayed sober, and he started that newspaper out on the east side. And that's how that all started. And he went out there, he weighed 350 pounds, and he rode a bicycle, didn't have a car. And he rode that bicycle out on Santa Clara Street, get off that bicycle, walk in a hardware store and ask them to put an ad in the paper that did not even exist. And they bought it. And he got that newspaper started, made a success out of it. He lived to see the day that he did a lot of good on the east side. He lived to see the day that the guy canned him from the Mercury News. They gave him a 5-year dinner on the east side of town, and this very guy gave him the plaque that fired him. So that was Bill Grace's story, you know.
You got to see Bill Wilson get the Lasker Award. Can you tell us about that?
I sobered up in July 22nd, 1951, and in October, it's in the book. It's in the AA book on the back of it, the Lasker Award. Anybody can read it. I was there.
So tell me about, was it a big party?
Bill Wilson. It was done at the Opera House, and the Opera House holds about 3,000 people?
Yeah.
And it was full, and he was there invited to receive the Lasker Award, and the Lasker Award was given to the organization or fellowship that did the best for humanitarian purposes the year before. And Alcoholics Anonymous won the award that year. And he did there and told his story. And when we heard that was going to happen, we got a hold of $5 and filled a gas tank up and went in, 2 couple of us, and parked and went in and heard the story. And when he came down after, shook hands with Bill Wilson on the whole bit. So that when I was sober 90 days. Wow. And I thought that God had blessed me and come down and stroked me as genius, you know.
Well, God certainly has blessed you, my dear. Tell me about when Jack finally followed you into this organization.
Well, Jack and I, you know, we were really close. And when I quit 6.5 years before, that really ruined the drinking buddyship. And but that didn't keep from coming over. They'd come over on Christmas, and we'd still go out to dinner. But Jack could stay sober as long as he was with me, and so he kept getting loaded more and more. And finally, his wife got too much of it, and she went to the motel, and Old called me up, and he said, "Easthouse, where the hell's my woman?" I said, "Well, she kicked your butt out. She moved out on you, and she wants you to sober up." "Well," he said, "by God, I don't have a damn problem. I'm just going to go over there at the house and stay, and maybe when she gets sick and tired of this, she'll come home." Well, about 3 days later, she wasn't sick and tired of it yet. So he calls me up again, trying to get her back. So he promised to quit. He'd come over, and finally we had dinner together out at Spivey's. And he made the old threatened promise that he's going to quit. And 90 days later, I was building some house down to Salinas. And he come down with a load of cabinets. He said, "Easthouse, I got this thing figured out. I've been going to all these silly meetings, and all you do is you got to moderate it, and you cut it down, and you just be like normal people do, and we just overlook that. All you got to do is just cut it down." I said, "Well, old buddy, that's the way you feel about it. Go right over to the pub and start in." "My God, I'll do that." So he drove his truck over to the pub, and when I got off work that night, I drove over there, and he was halfway in his bibs then, and we started driving home, and we got up here to a coffee shop near town, going to stop and get a cup of coffee, and he side brushed a woman in a car, and the cops come over, stopped him, interviewed her. They didn't even give him a damn ticket. So he said, "See there? Nothing to it." You know, but about 90 days later, why, he'd had it. He'd really done it good, and she'd thrown his ass out again, and so he called up. And I met him down at Tiny's, and Tiny's restaurant was on the corner of Race and Alameda. That's a big restaurant there now. I guess it's a gay bar there now.
I haven't been in a bar lately. I wouldn't know.
So anyway, I met Jack down there, and Jim Raines, who was the second guy to sober up, he decided to sober because he'd been drinking with Jack, so he decided to sober up too, and he was the second sober AA in the county. Wow. So they went to the meeting with us, and the meeting at Prune Ridge had started 3 weeks before that. And so we took Jack and him, and we went over to that meeting and at Prune Ridge, and Jack come back in 1958, and I quit in 51. So it was 6.5 years later.
And he never drank again.
No. And he became a great speaker, going up and down the coast and all that, you know. I did my fair share, but I couldn't hold a candle to Old. He was the greatest. Anyway, probably one of the greatest speakers we had here. Yeah. Right. And we had some good ones, but none like that. And he did a lot of 12-stepping. Hell, old John and Johnny Gallagher, we grabbed him one time and he took him home, and Holt threw him in the bathtub, and he got in there, and the crazy damn fool was even drinking his shampoo crap. And he did his share of shampoo, did his share of a 12-stepping, and then we became inseparable. got on the board with the Atlanta Club, both of us together. We were on the board when we bought the building out on Fair Avenue. And we bought that building for $40,000.
Wow.
The Atlanta Club burned down on Almaden in 1957, and they rented where the Atlanta Club West was in 1958. They rented that building till 1961 or two, and then we bought the building, saved up $10,000, and bought the building on Fair Avenue for $40,000, and they carried a note for $30,000, but the bank didn't security loan didn't want to carry the note, and the guy that had the heavy guy that was in the business was in the liquor business by the name of Joseph George, and he owned a big liquor distributing agency all over Salinas, Santa Cruz, all over, and he carried a lot of accounts in the bank there, security savings, and Harold Peck, who was a good friend of Joseph George, played golf with him. Harold was telling Joseph George that they wouldn't give us a loan, and all in one it was a $30,000 loan. We'd having $10,000 up. Well, I'll be damned, he said. That's silly. He said, well, they don't want to loan it to a bunch of drunks. He's a bunch of drunks? Hell, you're sober. What's the matter with him? He said, let me talk to those people. So he called him up. He said, I might. This is a rumor, He said, I could change my account. Well, no, we'll give him the loan.
So you got 12-step by a bartender.
12-step by a bartender, and then we were saved by a liquor distributor deal.